Hi, everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots in Genealogy. Be sure to check us out on our blog and our YouTube channel and our newsletter. And our great sponsors, Your Dolce Vita, Italy Rooting, Abiativo Casa, and our newest sponsor, Phil Italy, for a great trip to Italy. I'm here today with a great guest, John Ruscigno. So welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You've been doing your research for quite a long time, yes?
Yeah, quite a while. Yeah, boy, I can't remember the year we started, but been at it a while.
And so what got you started? Why'd you start?
Um, I was lucky. My grandfather lived to be 102, so I got to know him pretty well. Got to spend time with him, and just after he passed away, I just kind of had an interest in the history, how far back it would go, and try to find information about him. And I had a lot of information from my relatives and where he was from and the towns. Of course, most of it turned out not be true. Because he spoke broken English, they misunderstood what he was saying a lot of times, how he pronounced towns. So I hired a company, I forget the name of it now, but to get me extracts of my grandparents' birth and marriage certificates. And that was kind of the start. It got me that first information, where they were from. About that time, I think it was when Ellis Island was coming online. And so I could go in and get copies of their ship manifest. And I remember the first time I saw my grandfather's name on the manifest, immediately got goosebumps in my arms. And it was like, well, okay, I'm hooked now. And I had a subscription to a magazine. I think it's Grace Oliva used to have a magazine called Communes of Italy, and had a subscription to that. I learned a lot. And there was a Yahoo group by Dan Nemec on Bari. And so I kind of learned a little bit by bit. And then I kept reading about, you could see films at the Family History Center at the LDS churches. But I was initially nervous to go in. My God, they might try to convert me. But finally got up enough nerve and I went in there, and it was just a great experience. They were so helpful, and using input from Dan Nemec on what films to look for. That was helpful. And I started going, and these were in the days when you had to go to the Family History Center and order a film. It would come in several days. You'd go in and put them on these old clunky machines and look at them. And I had some data sheets I designed myself to write down all the information. Then I'd bring it home and enter it in I think I had Family Tree Maker. I'd enter it all in there. And I was at the point where I was ordering 10 films at a time. And I don't remember what I paid for them, but I was kind of limited by the volunteers running the place. They're only open certain days and hours. And I was going in there so much, the guy running the place gave me my own key to the place so I could go in anytime I wanted. And that was really helpful. So I was in odd hours when they weren't even open. I'd be the only one in there going through these films. And then they closed down that Family History Center, and I had to go to another one. And they weren't so free with their keys. So I was going in there in the hours they were open, and I was looking at films. And there was a lady there, one of the volunteers. She was pretty old at that time, and she was always coming to talk to me, and she was fascinated by what I was doing. I thought it was really neat. She came in one day and she gave me her ID and password so I could look at the films from home. And it was because she was involved in transcribing records. So that got me back on track or going through a lot of films from home, make a lot more progress. And what it didn't take me that long to trace my family back to on the civil records, back to the late 1700s, some of the earlier references. But I found out when I started looking for aunts and uncles and where my relatives married into other families, I kept having to reorder the same films over and over. So I decided, I might as well just, when I get a film, like the birth records for a certain year, just copy all of them you have, even the ones that aren't your relatives. So that started me on kind of thinking more towards a database that had all of the Sannicandro records in them. And my grandfather, he was from Sannicandro. My grandmother was from Lucido. So I went through and I was just copying complete records. And at the time, I remember thinking, it's a shame that people have to pay money to Ancestry to really get to these records, to see some of these records. And so that's when I started the idea of having my own website so people could go in there for free and find information on their families, and kind of just developed from there until I was working on those, and I added a lot of marriages from other complete marriage records from other nearby towns that my relatives had moved into. And I was always kind of complaining that I sure wish I had access to the church records, could go back even further. And I was talking with Nicholas, what's his last name? Alessandro. I think he's in Canada. He actually went there and copied the records, all the church records for Sannicandro and for Betrito too. And he let me, I helped him convert him into a PDF format, and he gave me access to those church records. So then I really had a ton of work to transcribe these church records. I completed the Sannicandro, and I'm still working on Betrito, but those were all in Latin. Of course, I don't speak Latin, let alone speak Italian. So I had to go back and forth with Nicholas a lot to translate some of those, but finally completed those. And like I say, I'm still working on the Betrito records, and I got the website launched.
So how many records do you have on the website now?
I think about 140,000 people.
My goodness. That's an amazing.
It's still growing. Like I said, it's embarrassing the number of hours I work at it on a daily basis, but it's a probably that doesn't help. I'm probably OCD myself. Just getting hooked.
That's just incredible. I think you break the record for people I talk to. So how far back do the church records go?
1591. And boy, the writing is poor. Some records are missing, and some of them are hard to read. But just kept plugging away at it and get it done. And those birth records go to 1591. Let me see. I think I've got oh yeah, the marriage records only go back to like 1648 for Sannicandro. But I always go through start with the marriage records, kind of establish the families. Then I usually do the death records to kind of confirm, make sure I have the families right. And then lastly, I do the birth records. So for Sannicandro and Lucido, I did all of those. When I get into some of the other towns, mostly just do the marriage and death records and some of the birth records.
So I've interviewed Dan. How do you know Dan?
I think there was you used to have these Yahoo groups you could join, and it was through I joined one of those that he ran into, and we had some relatives in common, so we were trading information, still trading information, and so that he was really, really helpful initially identifying the films to look at, and I learned a lot from him.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
reading that one of the magazines, Family Tree magazine or something, some guy was talking about using other people's data or family trees. And he said he's yet to see one that had like 100,000 and that was well referenced. And I'm thinking, well, mine's well over that, and mine's well referenced, But so you'd be shocked if the guy looked at mine. I was pretty adamant on getting good references, because I don't include any of the actual records just to save space, but I have links on where the record is. Like it'll say what page number of the Sannicandro birth records, something like that, so they could go and find the actual documents themselves, but they know what to look for.
That's incredible body of work for sure. So now you mentioned your grandfather lived to 102.
Yeah.
So I mean, what did he say about Italy and why did he come and everything?
You know, I never understood. Well, I wish I would ask him more about those kind of questions,
Mm.
but I didn't. It was I was still in my teens, and I'd go stop and just visit him, but we talked a lot, but didn't communicate a lot. We were because his broken English, he he didn't speak a lick of English, and but I could understand him because of he would kind of intersperse English and Italian. And I didn't know he was hard to understand until I took some friends with me. They couldn't understand a thing he was saying, but I just gotten used to filling in the gaps with him. But I never really got to him about, I wish I would ask more about what it was like when he came over. I remember him telling me once on the ship coming over how he was up on deck and he was ashamed to say he stole some food from some richer people while he was on deck on the ship coming over. But I could tell from the records he came over and he settled in Portland, Oregon area where I grew up. And my grandmother came over. He came over in 1905. She joined him in 1908. And they had one child that died shortly after birth in Italy. Then they had 9 children here. One of them died in his teens. So they had 8 children that lived to adulthood. And when he settled in Portland, his brother also settled here and had similar number of kids. And I think he worked for the railroad initially, where a lot of the people from Sannicandro came and worked for the railroad out here, and either this around Portland or around centered around Spokane, Washington. A lot of two of the railroad centers, and so they could even use a train to go back and forth to visit each other, people they knew from the old country. And let's see, what did he found out? We started working for the railroad, and he found out he was on the lowest pay scale because they had him registered as a Negro, and that ticked him off, and he quit. He quit the railroad and he went to work. They had a stove manufacturer in here that makes big wood burning stoves people use to heat their homes and to cook on. And they made those, and large part of them were some cast metal, and his job was to polish the castings. So he was known as a stove polisher. And I remember one time I had his polishing wheels. I guess you took your special polishing wheels and could to ply your trade wherever you were going to work. But he did that for years until sometime in the 40s he got colon cancer. And at the time, it was like a death sentence, but there was one doctor out here who would perform a colostomy operation, but it was considered experimental. but he did the operation. And like I say, he lived to be 102, but it took him out of the workforce. But he was living next door to his brother, and they got the bright idea they can make a fortune in California. So the two families got in this big truck that his brother owned and drove down to California. They'd all had mattresses, and they'd sit in the back of this big truck, and they'd stop at night, throw the mattresses out on the ground, and sleep on the ground. Well, and they went to San Jose is where they went, and found out there wasn't a fortune to be made in San Jose. Plus, him and his brother had a falling out. So they parted. My grandfather, he bought a big tent, and the family would contract to live in an orchard and do the picking for the season. And they'd move from orchard to orchard, living in this tent. And I guess eventually they got tired of that, or when it came to off season, no fruit to pick, they headed back up to Portland, and he settled in North Portland, in his big old house, still there. And his kids, I think all of his kids, or almost all of them, lived within a 5-mile radius of him. So I kind of grew up knowing my aunts and uncles pretty close. It wasn't we just didn't see them at holidays and stuff. Spent a lot of time with them. The bringing up was unusual. We like most Italian families, you get together on the holidays, but we got together a lot of other times too. I could stop in at their house, or I'd go on vacation with them, or we'd take some of our cousins on vacations with us. So it was different growing up from most of my friends.
Oh yeah, no, the same thing with me. And that's a fascinating story. And um, coming from New York, we don't realize that there were so many different Italian enclaves, around the country. And Portland in 1905, I never would have thought of that. I never would have expected that.
All about the railroad.
Yeah. That's just incredible. That you know, and that I think that's the way it was too. People from that town, somebody would go someplace, and then they would all gravitate there. But that was a hike from Italy to Portland, that's for sure.
Yeah, you could look at like on this ship manifest coming over. He said he was going to go visit some cousin that lived in Portland, and I think he needed a sponsor at that time. Anyway, that's how he ended up in Portland. Some other cousin. They I always thought they used the term cousin loosely.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
I have a story about that. When I started doing the genealogy, my father told me, he says he had some cousins that lived in New York, and he would when he was in the service, he stopped in New York and visited them, and he'd sure like to know how they're doing and maybe get in touch with them again. And I could never find out because they were both two girls. It was hard tracking the names, and he. So I finally found one of them, and she had unfortunately passed away. And the other one, I knew her name. Her name was Louise, but I could not find anything on her. And this is almost spooky to me at the time. There was one weekend where my dad, when he wanted me to visit, he'd call and say, "Hey, I'm cooking some potatoes. Come on over." So I went over there, and as I walked into the house, his phone rang. And he says, "Answer the phone." They always ordered you like that. They didn't ask you. And I answered the phone, and it's this lady, Louise, his cousin. She had gone through the phone book and found the name and just happened to call right then. And so it was just a miracle. Anyway, they established a friendship and talked until till he passed away. And then I talked to her, and we even went and visited her in New York till she passed away. But I traced these two back. through the civil records, and I couldn't find any common ancestor. And they insisted they were cousins. You know, when I got into the church records, I finally found a common relative back in 16 something. That was, by God, they are related. Not, I mean, that's really distant cousins, but because it went back several generations before I found the common ancestor.
I'm a firm believer in that there are no accidents. You know, it was meant to be. It was meant to be.
Yeah, my dad, he always said, there. I said I ran across another Ruscigno, and he says they're not related. And I said, they gotta be. No one wakes up one day and says, I'm gonna change my name to Ruscigno. I said, it doesn't happen. They gotta be related somehow. You just haven't found the common ancestor. And at one time when I was working on this website, before I got a hold of the church records, I was going online using Ancestry, and I'd find all the people from those towns that came to this country, and I'd link them to their when they came to this country. Then I'd link them to the census, and I'd find all these records where they were linked to their activities when they came to this country, so people could see their relatives now and trace some of them back all the way back to Italy. You know, but then I didn't get that many done of those until I got the church records, and that took me in another direction.
So have you been back to Sannicandro?
Yeah, there was I'm trying to think what year it was, around 2001 or something. Our son was in the Navy and stationed in Naples. And so we thought, good time to go visit. And as long as we're there, I might as well go check out Sannicandro. So we did. And we just went, unfortunately, we were only there like a day and a half, but found a relative there. It was my grandpa's nephew is who it was still living there. And they treated you like royalty, you know, and they made a big show of, like, they'd parade you around town to show off their American relatives, and make a big what's the term? I haven't heard him use the same term. Some of my relatives say he thinks he's a big shot, you know.
But they make you a big shot when you're there, right? It is incredible.
Oh yeah,
It is incredible.
We were there for just lucky. There was a festival going on there. I think it was in September, late September. There was an annual festival and big production, and he was taking us down to see that. He kind of walked in front of us, with kind of his hands behind his back, almost looked like an ice skater, the way he'd kind of walk in front of you. And he had told me he knew everyone in town, because at the evening he'd go down to the town center and talk with his buddies. But he was acting like he didn't know these people when he was leading us down there. He was just showing off, he was acting like a big shot.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. So now I got your name from Valerie Evans. So how did you meet Valerie? Because her story is fantastic too.
Oh yeah, I think it was just joining one of the Facebook groups for Bari, and then that's kind of, I think I belonged to that group when I launched the website, and then I knew her that way, where she would ask me a lot of questions about the website. Kind of had it featured, a feature of the Facebook group she was administrator for.
And I don't remember. So now, are you related to her? Or have you found the relations to her or no?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
don't remember either.
through my using Family Tree Maker for store all my data, it shows me I'm related to everybody. But it's, I mean, some really long, stretched out linkage. You know, the nephew of the son of the daughter of, and all the way from me to whoever individual I'm looking at. So being related is kind of relative.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Um, you know, my mom's family is from Puglia, from Bari. They're from Torito.
Oh yeah,
And I mean, we, you know, same thing when we went there. They just, I don't, if there are relatives there, they're extremely, extremely distant. We did meet somebody with her same last name, but um, the funny thing is that he moved when my uncle left, because my uncle left in the 50s. When my uncle left, this gentleman moved into the house that they lived in. So I thought for sure he was a relative, but he wasn't. But you know, they just took us all around the town, spent the whole day with us, just took us around, took us to the where they produce the olive oil, and they're big on almonds there, which I think is probably that whole area is known for the almonds. But they brought us to the plant where they package the almonds and all of that kind of stuff, you know.
yeah, that was it was quite the experience. Really enjoyed it. Um, I enjoyed the part when we were there. I wanted to go to the cemetery, and so you could see some of your ancestors. And I was filming everyone with the Ruscigno last name, and he kept telling me, "Not related, not related." And he's kind of go back to his house, and he was making fun of us for taking pictures of those Ruscignos that we weren't related to, which is just that way he saw it. But I was talking to another older Ruscigno from Toronto, and he was telling me about the sopranoms. There were two lines of Ruscignos in Sannicandro, and mine was one, and theirs was the other one. And but that when they meet, they trade the sopranoms. They know if they were direct line or not. In fact, the guy I was talking to, I connected with some guy from Toronto, and his father, old, he was probably 80 at the time I was talking to him, and he was explaining it to me, and he was telling me about during World War II, where he was working in his, because he didn't go over until the 50s, but he was working in his field, and some U.S. soldier came up and asked him about directions, said his same last name, and come to find out it was my uncle who was in the army and was there in Italy. So he had met my uncle in Sannicandro and pointed him at where his family was.
Wow, that's something. That's something.
Yeah,
Yeah, see, I was just looking at the map. I didn't realize that Torito was so close to Sannicandro. And um my grandfather's family actually originally came from Acquaviva dell'Infanti. So
yes.
we visited there, but we visited there um, you know, during siesta. So there was literally not we were the only four people on the street. There was the three of us and the driver. That was it. Nobody in that entire town.
I remember I remember when we were in Sannicandro, we had reserved motel, a place to stay at right on the outskirts of Sannicandro. And I had a reservation there for a couple nights. And we visited my cousin. Then after we ate, I said we had to go check into the motel. He insisted on going with us. So he drove us over there. We go in and met with the guy, and my my relative there, he starts negotiating with the guy, and they make a big production. You would think they were going to get into a fist fight over the price, what they were going to charge us. Finally, I could see they came to some agreement, and they shook hands and they poured glasses of grappa for us. We all had drank the grappa. He ended up the same price I had when I made the reservation, but he had made such a big production out of it.
Ah, that's so funny. That is too funny. Uh, but I guess he figured he got you a deal, so everybody in the end was happy, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe he got the deal that they wouldn't take anything from our room while we were there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we didn't. I wish we had stayed in Torito, but we went there for the day, and then we were staying in. We stayed in Bari, which we absolutely love. You know, Bari, the city itself, was um, quite different from Naples, because Naples is, well, first of all, it's the biggest city, but it's very all the stone and everything is gray or black, and Bari, everything is white. It's the whole city is just white, so it was
Huh.
really, really neat. And we stayed in the old part of town, which was impossible to maneuver without getting lost. And we finally figured out that the best way back to the hotel was to walk to the sea, walk along the pathway from around the sea, and find our hotel that way. It was a little bit longer, but at least we knew where we were going.
Yeah.
Because those old towns are really, really something. So I asked everybody the same question when they did go back. The food, right? The food is
Oh, just unbelievable. Food was all good.
and fresh, and everything homemade. It's just really, really an amazing experience. I tell everybody, if you haven't gone back, you have to try and get back to the hometowns, because that's where the family is. That's the real Italy. And even if you don't know anybody's there, when you just walk down the streets, you feel at home.
Yeah, you do. And I feel like you're, I don't know, experiencing what your ancestors did. Interesting. When we were there, they weren't that. They seemed to know their ancestors back to their grandparents. They didn't know anything after that, and they weren't that interested. They were interested in how I got all my information, but they weren't interested in the actual information. They just wasn't an issue to them.
Yeah, yeah. They don't do a lot of that. Although I've talked to certain people, like for example, one of my cousins over there, and I think it's just true that some people are interested in the genealogy and others aren't.
Yeah.
I found my dad's mother's family, Piramalo. I found the fourth cousin who was doing what I was doing. I mean, she was searching back, and she was looking for people, and she thought, because the family, the Piramalo, was originally from Spain, she thought she would find people in Spain or in South America. She never expected to find anybody in America, because well, she didn't even know, but fact was only two people from that family actually came to America.
Oh,
Everybody else stayed in Italy. So she was like, blown away when we found each other. But she's been, a really, really big help in helping me, and, piecing together and finding more cousins over there. I mean, she's just been so invaluable. And
that would be a
helping
good
me.
connection.
And through her, I found photos and homes and everything else. And we met when we were there 2 years ago. We had been conversing for like, geez, probably close to 4 years. And then we finally got to meet, and it was just yeah, it was just incredible. And you like I said before, it's like these people forever.
Right.
So weird. It's so weird.
You see some like common expressions or mannerisms, just kind of makes me chuckle when I hear like the thing about the biggest shot. It's just have the same attitude as generations apart.
But there's something, and I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but my wife is half Puerto Rican and half Sicilian, but we lived in England for a while. And our next door neighbor they, both, well, they were all English, but on one side was Beryl and Harry, and my wife and Beryl, from the minute they met, had this connection that you could never put your finger on. Like, why did they have this connection unless, maybe in some past life or something like that, they were they were connected. But and yeah, it was immediate. It's very odd, very odd.
I was going to tell you another story. One thing we did, I said, it's real close to my aunts and uncles, and as we spent a lot of time. I'm easily retired now, but you think you're going to travel in retirement. We ended up spending our retired lives taking care of their old people. And they were, it started with my parents, but did my an aunt and uncle and another aunt and uncle. In talking to them, they all had very common fears and interests, and they all wanted to stay in their own home. They did not want to leave their home. And they were also all worried about being able to pay their bills because, they get confused. And they were worried if they didn't pay a bill, they'd get their electricity turned off or something. So I worked with my parents and all my aunts and uncles where I says, we're going to help you stay in your home as long as you can. And there was me and some of my cousins would kind of work as a team on keeping them there, do the shopping for them, take them to doctor's visits. But they all greatly appreciated it. And I told them, I said, no, the only thing is there'll come a point when we can't provide enough help for you. And I says, you'd be looking at as out here, they call them adult foster homes. I says, that'll be your only place to go to. You won't be able to move into one of these where you have a social life because you'll have needs that those places can't provide. I says, and they all did that, and we never came to a point where we had to encourage them to go into a foster home. They all came to the same point where they says, I think it's time for me to go into a foster home. So it was a very smooth transition, and greatly eventually just took over all their finances and made sure their bills are paid. They were always fascinated how I could balance their checkbooks without having to fill out the check register every month. They couldn't believe I could do that on the computer.
I'm so glad we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, well, I found out I was doing it. My dad's found out behind my back, he was taking his check register up to the bank and having them balance it for him anyway, because he just didn't quite believe me. And it was very rewarding to take care of those aunts and uncles, and they sure appreciated it. But it was even better quality time to spend with them, right up to the end of their lives. The one uncle, he lived to be 104, so we spent a lot of time with him.
Geez, you're going to be like 120 with those words.
I feel like I'm only 75, but I feel like I'm 102 already.
I'm 73. Does time seem to like it's going like faster?
Yeah, it does. A lot faster. Yeah. Luckily I'm addicted to the genealogy, so I don't get bored.
Well, and that's the same thing with me. I retired like I guess almost 9 years now. But I got right into doing that. And, I have friends who are like, how could you quit? I said, I keep myself busy. If you keep yourself busy, you won't miss it. You won't miss work. Find a hobby, do something, I'm not saying everybody should do genealogy. It's not their thing, but you should be able to find something to do, learn a language, write a book, whatever,
Yeah. I agree. That's got to have something to replace. I never missed work a bit.
No, no, neither did I. You know, at the beginning, my wife said, don't you miss work? I said, I don't. I worked for a big bank, and it just started. It was getting more and more political, that I just, I couldn't deal with it anymore. I was to the point where I was an executive director. I couldn't even order a pencil.
Huh. I enjoyed my job, but I found my job was cutting into time I wanted to spend on genealogy. So I didn't miss it that bad because I knew I could spend more time doing what I enjoyed.
No, that's fantastic. So before we go, where can people find you, or where can they find the website?
The website, it's all one word, BariAncestors.com is the website. And there's they can send emails through that site to me if they have something to say about the website, or if they have questions about the website, or have people still getting a hold of me to add people to the website. So add more, their families. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
It's fantastic. Well, listen, John, thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too.